fabric of what this village was and continues to be. It's like the stone houses that are within the village. It's like the other walls that were classified as historic a few months ago. One of our concerns is that this is a visual component of the village, and compared to what went on earlier with the wall on Mill Street, the owner tore down half of a wall before we had a chance to go through the whole process. Um, and it's just diminishing the village as houses are being torn down, as walls are being torn down. It's just diminishing the look of a historic village. So I am very much in favor of doing this. What the declaration means is that the owners, it doesn't stop them from doing anything to maintain it and all that. But if they want to tear it down or add to it, then they would have to go to the commission to get approval. So I'm for this and think it should be classified as a historic part of the village. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Akers. Anyone else on Zoom?
Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to speak on this matter of 127 Garrison? Okay, no one at this time.
Okay, so if you're here today, this evening with us, and you'd like to comment on 127 Garrison, please come up to the podium.
Can I say something else? Can the owner say something else?
Sure.
Based on the gentleman's comments just a second ago, I know he was talking about the wall that's on Mill Street, but our wall is not the same as that wall. Our wall is extremely loved and well cared for, and it is not, I don't know what's considered historical, but 1951, the nice thing about our wall is it looks historical because we take such great care of it. It is not historical. It does look great with the village. Why? Because of how it's cared for on our part. And we want to be in control of that, not somebody else. It's not the stone house on Mill Street. It is the house at 127 Garrison Road that was built in 1951. And we love it, and we want to be, you drive by it and you'll know why it's loved. That's why it's even being noticed right now.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Rubino. Anyone, Mrs. Lothar?
Can I comment on that, please, Charles Akers?
No, we can't go back and forth.
Let's Miss Mary Lothar is going to comment first, and let's see where we're at.
Hi, Mary Lothar, 120 North Ellicott. I just wanted to comment on the fact that I don't know when the wall was built. It may be, it sounds like the Rubinos aren't quite sure either. They said it was there, they thought, before the house was built. I don't know that for a fact. I do know that New York State recognizes as historic anything more than 50 years old. So it certainly qualifies, it's at least 70 years old or 72 years old in that respect. That's the New York State regulation for historic parcels. But the fact is that one of the things that Mr. Akers was referring to was the fact that on Mill Street, that wall was removed after it had been nominated, before it was approved or disapproved. And then it ultimately ended up tearing out the whole thing. And it was a loss to the village. We advertise heavily that this is a historic village. We have signs at every entrance to the village saying, welcome to the historic village of Williamsville. And I think it's really important that we remember that these are the things that make up the fabric of the village, whether it's a historic home or a historic building or a historic stone wall. And I have great faith in the Rubinos. Their wall every year is the most beautiful one on Garrison, the best planted and the best watered. I see Mr. Rubino out there every morning on my way to work, watering his flowers, and they look perfect the way he does them. But I'm not as worried about the Rubinos as I may be the next person who might own the property. And that's the reason why we would ask to have a say-so in any alterations to the wall. We aren't going to make you go out there and scrub the wall or do anything like that, but we only control the wall if there's alterations to be made, or if you decide to repoint it, we can point you in the right direction to get someone who can come in and make sure the mortar's the correct color and consistency. Or if you have to add to it or move it or delete a part of it. We've had people who've actually picked up the end pillars of stone walls on their property. And there's an example on Reese Street right now where they've moved the pillar to the front of the wall and have taken away from the real character of the wall. It looks kind of silly. That's the owner's, decision, but that's the kind of thing that we're trying to prevent. We don't think that, there's fault with the Rubino family at all. I think they've built a beautiful home and I think they've maintained the wall beautifully. But I think we have to recognize the things that make up the fabric of this community and the history that's involved in them. So I hope you would take that into consideration tonight when you make your decision and if you vote on it. And I appreciate your hearing me out. Thank you.
Mary,
Yes,
can I ask you a question?
sure.
So both in the intensive level survey and in the nomination form, it suggests that this wall maybe possibly could have been constructed by Mr. Oshner.
Mr. Exner.
Yeah, Exner, is that how you say it?
Exner.
Okay. So other than the fact that it kind of sort of looks like other stonework that he's done, was there, or to your knowledge, any evidence to support that other than appearance?
I don't know. I did not do the research on it and I looked through all my stuff frantically this afternoon to see if I had anything else in my files and I couldn't find anything. I think that when the proposal was put forward, I think our former chairperson was the one who made up the paperwork on it. And I don't recall seeing it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here.
Yeah.
And it follows literally word for word what was in the suggested nomination form that was in the intensive level survey. So, all Ms. Culpa did was reiterate that information. I've looked through the intensive level survey, I looked through the reconnaissance, and both documents kind of hedge on that topic. So I wouldn't expect that Ms. Culpa would necessarily have any more knowledge of it. And I just didn't know if you did. So then one other question for you then. So the 5 possible points for nomination, 2 of them were checked. One of them was associated with the lives of individuals or of people or of events significant to the national, state, or local history. And then the other one is the real obvious one, I think, which is everyone's sort of general point, is that it's a unique location, singular in character, right? So I guess my question for you is, with the first one and the association with persons and events, would you assume, and I realize I'm asking you to make an assumption, but would you assume that that is referencing the possibility of the Mason? Or is there?
I think that's a possibility because it was mentioned in the survey.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So to that end, the designation application form that we all have in front of us, the dates that are checked of significance is between 1900 to 1941. That wall is possibly or was possibly constructed. Am I reading that correctly?
That is what it says.
That's when Mr. Exner was a Mason here in the village.
Okay,
He died in the 40s.
okay,
So I think that's referencing him.
okay. So, but we don't know for sure if he was indeed the mason
No.
who put that wall together and or if it even existed when Mr. Oishner was living it.
No.
Right, we don't have that information.
But New York State now recognizes anything 50 years or older as historic.
Right, I'm
Just- yeah.
aware of that. Okay, so I guess,
Well, I mean,
Well,
we're still in public
it's-
comment, so.
yeah, okay, I'm
Yeah.
just asking a question for clarification, okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is anyone else here who would like to comment on 127 Garrison Road, stone wall? Okay. Well, if there's no other comments, I would make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing unless somebody feels that there's a need to keep the public hearing open. Anyone?
Second.
Is there any, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so we're closing out the public hearing. And then I guess that I just want to, see from the board, does everybody feel that they have enough information this evening to go forth and call for a vote? I'm comfortable doing it, but I wanted to see for everyone else. I don't want to be accused of rushing people to make a decision, so. Is there anyone who is not comfortable with closing, not only closing it tonight, but taking a vote on this?
I have no problem closing it.
And voting on it tonight, calling for a vote, okay. Okay. All right, I guess I'll call for a vote.
I know
Well,
it's,
I'm doing that as part of.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're doing it, yeah.
I know it's a bit uncharacteristic.
Mhm.
Just wanted to put this to your attention. John Rubino has raised his hand again. I know it's not in order, so just want to give that to your attention and let you know.
Mhm. Trustee, you too? Are you okay with?
Letting them speak.
Well, I've already closed the public hearing, so.
Right.
I mean,
I guess you could speak during suspension of rules.
Yeah, you can do, right, yeah.
So John, we're gonna move on from the public hearing, but you'll be able to have a chance to speak again during the suspension of rules portions,
right.
which is basically right now. So give us one moment.
Okay, so we've initially discussed, just to kind of refresh everybody's memory, we initially had these public hearings for the other proposed historic landscape features in June 8th of 2020. We're, with COVID and everything, we're now here today on April 26th, 2021. We did have Mr. and Mrs. Rubino send us a letter requesting an in-person meeting, and I know they had something come up today, so they're joining us via Zoom, which is perfectly fine. I think that, I'd like to see the board decide one way or another on this evening. I certainly feel that we've all had enough time to mull over this, and I think we should be able to make a capable decision this evening. So I'm gonna go ahead and call for a vote on whether or not this should be designated as a local landmark. So I believe Deputy Treasurer Pasco, I believe you'll do the roll call vote on that.
No,
Right,
I'm doing
is that
that.
it, or you're doing, I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, that's part of that's under my
Your resolution.
my resolution to see.
Yeah, it's already on the agenda. We should take it in order on the
Okay,
agenda.
all right,
Right.
okay. All right, so let's move into suspension of rules then for public participation. So I'll make a motion to open the suspension of rules for public participation.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so if you have anything as it relates to a village topic or thought, if you could just state your name and address for the record, and Keaton, we'll start with Zoom again.
John, if you'd like to speak, I asked you to unmute, so I'll take you first. Still there, John?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If you'd like to speak on
Go ahead.
any matter.
Say what you-
Basically, we bought the property from the original owner that built the house. Her name was Marie Kidd. And we purchased the property in December of 1999, moved in it in February of the year 2000. And she told us all about the property, how it was built, this and that. And she never mentioned that the wall was there before the house was built. So we know the property pretty much more than anybody else in the village. And there is no documentation that wall was built before the house. So we don't feel it's historical at all. And we're definitely against having it deemed that way. Just like this board voted before. So everybody was against having that designation for having a stone wall in the property in the village. So we hope this board will do the same thing as they did earlier. And we weren't able to attend that meeting, so we appreciate that respect for our property.
And I just want to say one more thing regarding the time frame of the wall being built. There wasn't a house on that property prior to the house that was built in 1951. I can't imagine somebody building a wall like that without a house behind it. You know, just to put a little perspective on it, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So that's basically
Thank you very
my
much for your
thoughts. Thank you
consideration.
all. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Going off of Zoom,
Mhm.
would anybody else like to speak? Please use the raise your hand function. Anyone on Zoom?
Chuck Akers?
Sure.
Yeah, I just pulled out the 1997 reconnaissance survey of the village. And it states in there,
How neat is that?
It's okay, you can continue, Chuck. John, I had to mute you. Very sorry.
it states in there, and I quote this right out of the survey on page 44. An important landscape feature of the Garrison Road is the random stone wall, photograph 138, running along the front property line of the colonial revival style home at 127 Garrison Road. It may be the work of the local mason, Agnes Ochner. This report was a survey of the village, which was a roadmap of those things that should be designated as historical sites. And again, if this was built in 51, it meets the criteria of a historic property, the timeline. But the important aspect is that it is part of the visual fabric of this historic village. And the current owners, I tip my hat to them because they do maintain it. It's fabulous, but we're worried about other owners that might come and follow that might not have the love of the wall and that, and would want to tear it down or destroy it. The designation is only if they make major changes to the wall do they come to HPC and say what they want to do, or if they want to demolish it. Otherwise, HPC in the village has no control about what they do with it. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, moving down the list of people on Zoom. Is there anyone left on Zoom who would like to speak to the board? You can use the raise your hand function or just kind of give us a shout. Anyone at all? All right.
Is there anyone here this evening who would like to approach the podium?
Good evening, board members. My name is Thomas Frank. I live at 5403 Main Street, and I'd just like to bring to your attention an opportunity for a joint venture with the town of Amherst for the Amherst Central Park, which is based on the Ellicott Creek watershed. And it should be a model that extends through 2050 because it's a part of the relicensing of the Niagara Power Project. Okay, that you have issues that need to be looked at, but also there are opportunities, and I've been to the Rhinestone Woods Nature Preserve in Cheektowaga, that as far as doing something like that here, and you should be able to walk from Main Street down to Sheridan Drive as far as the Hutchinson Hose Company, the old Hutchinson Hose, which is a part of the Youth and Recreation Center. As far as tying this sustainable environmental education into the schools, the Mill Middle School and the North Forest Elementary School. And just so you know, on Wednesday, today's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're going to be coming out with the federal funding, calling for these initiatives as far as watershed, water quality. You're made out of water. You're 60% water. And as far as having a supernatural Niagara watershed experience that will go all the way down to the Tonawanda Creek and the Niagara River, that this long-term, as far as the Greenway, it's a part of the New York State Greenway system. As far as pedestrian and bicycles, the schools, they've got football, baseball, basketball, tennis, hockey, golf, but they don't have any bicycles. The most efficient means of transportation on the planet. I mean, as far as an educational opportunity. And also my suggestion is that because the town is in the village and because the Amherst Central Park has long-term, large-scale effects on the village and the town, that it's going to require a consortium, a collaboration of entities to participate in. And it's going to create, as far as the tourism industry, as far as what they're calling for are some initiatives with young people, that automentia is a treatable social disorder as far as the traffic on Main Street. Okay, and also as far as looking at things like the impervious surface ratios. Okay, as far as there are opportunities here, as far as landscape architectural design, as far as the terrestrial and aquatic.
Okay, so you're over the 3 minutes.
Over 3 minutes, I thought it was only at 2.5. What I'm suggesting is a joint meeting on a quarterly basis with the town,
Okay,
as far as the various different committees, so that you're not at cross purposes with each other. As far as we're talking about a $50 million capitalization for this project through 2050.
okay, thank you, Mr. Frank.
You're welcome.
Anyone else who would like to approach the podium? Come on up. Just your name and address, please, for the record.
Good evening, Noel Bartlow, 55 California Drive. Good to see you guys.
Good to see
I
you.
haven't
too.
seen
It's
you
been a while.
since fall.
Yeah.
But hey, just a couple quick questions. I was looking through the meeting minutes the last couple of months, and I was just wondering if there were any formal changes to Picture Our Parks 2025 since I was on the board.
Formal changes in what way?
Like planning, drawings, future plans, thoughts, where things are going.
We do have some drawings.
We do have some drawings. I actually presented 2 weeks ago some drawings for the basketball and tennis courts at South Lawn.
Okay.
Which we're hoping to actually have constructed before the fall of this year.
Fantastic.
The most significant change to it, you're probably very familiar with this image.
Yes.
Okay, so the most significant change, Molly and had shown these two courts located along Village Square Lane. One of the comments that we'd gotten, I think Nick Roth had brought up the orientation of the tennis courts. want to be north-south. And then just working out the geometry of the surveys and things, I determined that, in fact, both of these are better oriented along South Lawn,
Okay,
which that means that the softball diamond will be taken offline at some point this summer, and will eventually reappear closer to your backyard. The big thing that is different than anything that was ever discussed was there was a resident who approached us with a significant donation of trees. And there was a discussion of finding homes for those trees in both Island and South Lawn Park. Obviously, trees in South Lawn has always been a request. In looking at the layout of the sports fields and whatnot, it was determined that actually this zone, what would be sort of left there directly across from DPW, was actually the best location for new trees because the soccer field fit lengthwise. So I think it's 12.5 or so. I think they're magnolias.
it's about 18 to be honest, and they're
12.5,
huge. They're,
yeah.
yeah, about 18. They're oaks. They're
Yeah,
big.
they're oaks.
Oh, they're oaks. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That's my bad.
So my main point, Matt, thank you for the explanation,
Yep.
was, and I'm just, obviously, I'm not on the committee anymore. You guys are gonna do what you want to do, but for over a decade, we talked about trees, and yes, people always say more trees, especially when you say, do you want more trees? Everybody always says they want more trees. But for over a decade, the committee had expressly said, we have enough trees in the park, and putting more trees just takes away the open space. Those trees have definitely, and by the way, we discussed ad nauseum the alignment of the basketball court and the tennis court. And the reason that they were in the original plan where they were, where the trees are now, is because the give and take between, yes, in a perfect world, you would have the sun on a different side, but we have limited, the village has limited space. So we, as a committee, and you as the leader of the committee, we came up with a plan that was drafted and approved. And I just have to say, I'm totally disappointed with the fact you put basically $3,500 worth of trees and effort into that space where kids are playing ball all the time. And we had a plan for those courts to be there. And now you're going to end up with just crunching everything in.
We're actually not crunching things in though.
And by the way, let me finish, is the plan to have that second court in phase 2 or alternative 2 in the pictures. Now you're going to be taking, if you do that, it really does crunch everything up. So I just have to say I'm disappointed. I don't think you should be, and the Parks Committee for over a decade has said, we have enough trees there. We planted hundreds of trees in the parks. And you're right, whenever we put a survey out that says, do you want more trees? Everybody says you want more trees, but there is a limit if you're looking for open space. And now what you've taken is an entire corner of that park. It's going to be useless other than a picnic grove, and it's going to be right next to a road because eventually that DPW is going to be developed. That parking lot's going to be developed. I just have to say, I think it's a complete waste of space and effort. But anyway, I wish you guys would think harder about it. You can always transplant them somewhere else. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening?
We do have one more person via Zoom who raised his hand.
Okay, great.
Paul, if you'd like, it's your turn to talk to the board.
Hi, my name is Paul Pasco, 6 Kingsway Drive. I just wanted to say from my experience as the Amherst appointee to the Glen Park Joint Board that I'm going to miss the hard work and dedication of Deputy Treasurer Hazel Pasco. That in there.
I am too, Paul.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she will be missed. Any other raised hands? What is that?
No, We can ask one more time. Anyone on Zoom like to speak to the board? Nothing.
Okay, seeing no other comments there or in here, I will make a motion to close the suspension of rules for public participation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll get right into reports and resolutions. I'll let you get that up and I will make a motion to approve resolutions number 1, 2, and 3 as they appear on the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and I have no reports this evening, so I will go to Deputy Mayor Piazza for his reports and resolutions.
And I have no report or resolution, so I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Torrey, your reports and resolutions?
I have no resolution, but I do have a report with a few photographs. If Keaton would please bring them up.
Sure.
I just want to, this past Saturday, Boy Scout Troop 457 of Williamsville met at the Knoll Nature Pavilion in Glen Park to embark on a community project called the Eagle Scout Service Project. I was unfamiliar with the Scout Project and I did join them and took some photographs. The Eagle Scout Service Project is an opportunity for a scout from a local Boy Scout troop to demonstrate his leadership skills while directing volunteers to complete a project for the benefit of the community. The project is a culmination of the Scouts training and it requires a significant effort on their part. The project requires months of preparation and must benefit a community organization outside of Scouting. It may not benefit individuals or a business. Completing an Eagle project is one of the last requirements in order for a Scout to attain Scouting's highest award, that of Eagle Scout. Local Scouts have completed several projects at Glen Park throughout the years. This past Saturday, Scout Spencer Beatty, I don't know if you can't see him, he's the one at the, standing at the wall, at the gate. I don't know if you can raise it. Single person, you can't do these individually, right there on the right. That's Scout. That's him, Spencer. From Troop 457, organized about 25 Scouts and adults to paint all 27 wooden benches throughout Glen Park and the conduit lines inside the Knoll Nature Pavilion. So the village of Williamsville wishes to congratulate Spencer for earning his Eagle Scout distinction, and we wish to thank all members of Troop 457 for assisting and completing this service project. The freshly painted benches are very much appreciated by not only the village of Williamsville, but by all those who visit our beautiful park. It was a pleasure working and meeting everybody this weekend. Thank you so much. And here they are working. Here's the group.
Pass on our thank yous.
Yeah, great. They did a great job. I mean, they were done in less than 2 hours. I mean, I was so impressed with the
Wow.
professionalism
I think
and
they should do
detail at
more.
work. Great group of people. Great. Thank you. Okay, thank you. It's a great report. Next for his reports and resolutions is Trustee Sherman.
I just have a short report that I touched on in the work session. The beautification committee is full speed ahead on the Williamsville Garden Walk, which will be July 17th. And their next meeting is May 12th. And I believe it's at the Pocket Park. So that's a sure sign of spring that those very dedicated folks are full speed ahead. They'll all be done in person. There are no plans to do the garden walk in a virtual capacity.
Great. Okay, thank you, Trustee Sherman. And next for his reports and resolutions is Trustee Etu.
So one report, this coming Saturday, May 1st, from 9 until 11, in both South Lawn and Island Park. There will be I'm sorry, Lehigh. Sorry, my bad. I guess I shouldn't be doing this. There is a parks cleanup day scheduled. The Parks Committee and Ed Rath's office are jointly working on managing volunteers for that day. I'll be manning the welcome booth on Saturday morning. So everybody please come share in the load. So I have a couple of resolutions this evening. Resolved that the village administrator is hereby authorized and instructed to publish notice of a public hearing to be held on Monday, May 24th, 2021 at 3:30 p.m. for the purposes of hearing all persons interested in commenting on changes to chapters 12, 15, and 28 of the village building code. And for the record, for anyone interested, that the draft of that should be available by the time of our next meeting, May 10th. It'll be posted online, and there is nothing overwhelmingly significant about it, except it's a massaging of our existing code.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So number 2, resolve that historic landmark feature at 127 Garrison Road is hereby designated as a local historic landmark in accordance with chapter 47.
Okay, roll call vote?
Well,
Is that where I call for that?
Second.
we need a second, and then there's just on the question.
Oh, yeah.
So I just, as liaison for historic preservation, I just wanted to take a couple of seconds and for our newer board members and things, refresh information. So as it was said earlier, the designation is for the stone wall only, not for the house or the property. For anyone who may not be familiar with what that means, Mr. Akers commented on it, and I will reiterate, based on the Village of Williamsville's historic landmark design guidelines, the only activities associated with this wall that would trigger a certificate of appropriateness, which would be essentially, in effect, a permit application to the HPC, would be primarily demolition. The modifications to building materials, which includes repointing, if it's in the terms of like brickwork, it is sort of an interesting situation. Maybe Chip, you can opine on this a little bit, but that in this scenario would also fall under minor repair and maintenance that would not require a certificate of occupancy. So there's a little bit of a gray area there that I'd like some clarity on. And then the other thing I was going to offer is that this code that we just called for a public hearing on includes our demolition code, which we authored a year or two ago. And part of the reason that we're doing this earlier code revision that was just resolved is because there's a question about definition of what makes a structure and what constitutes an accessory structure and what constitutes a fence and playgrounds and things of this nature. And a lot of that conversation stems from the incident that occurred on Mill with the stone wall on that property. And was it demolished inappropriately? Was it, whatever. So that wall would now very clearly be defined in our code, historic preservation or not, as a structure that would require a demolition permit. The other thing is that our current code also has in it, as adopted, a referral clause where any demolitions in the village for any structure 50 years or older, because that is the New York State threshold for historic property or landmark, would be referred to HPC at that time for them to review the potential to nominate that landmark. So for the question of current ownership versus future ownership, what is decided tonight does not preclude a future nomination one way or the other. If it were to not be nominated this evening, it would not be the last time this conversation could be had. It would not be the nail in the coffin. It would simply be this evening. So there is some protection baked into our current code because of the situation that occurred on Mill, to at least hopefully mitigate the potential for, you know, a wanton removal of the wall in the future by some future owner. I think that was all I wanted to say. Chip, can you clarify that issue for me?
I can try, because this, so the term alter, you need a certificate, if it were to be landmarked, any structure that is landmarked requires a certificate of appropriateness if before there's any alteration or reconstruction. An alteration is defined as an act or process other than demolition or preventive maintenance that removes or changes the exterior appearance of significant historical or architectural features or the historical context of a designated landmark, including but not limited to exterior changes, additions, new construction, erection, reconstruction, or grading. I don't think that repointing would fall into that category, but you know.
Well, so the rub there is that in the design guidelines under process, it says, are you undertaking any of the following types of work? And it lists, you know, a dozen or so different things, including modifications to building materials, parentheses, including siding and repointing, close parentheses. But then it goes on to say the following types of work typically do not require a C of A. And it says minor repair, maintenance work that does not change the appearance of the landmark in any way. So if I hired a mason to repoint this stone wall on my property, and I did it in such a way that it did not change the appearance of that wall, then theoretically I would not need a C of A, except that I'm repointing, at which point I would need a C of A.
Well, I mean, those design guidelines were drafted before this new law was enacted. And I guess you're pointing out a potential discrepancy between that document and the law as adopted. I frankly, you know, maybe I'd have to go take a look to see what the Secretary of Interior standards say about repointing to know whether or not that would typically be something that would be considered an alteration of the historic structure.
Well, so I bring this up for the board's consideration because as the mayor pointed out earlier, you know, generally speaking, when we went through the laundry list of other stone landmarks previously, those were private residents who were not opposed to the designation. Those landmarks were designated, and then those private residents who did express opposition generally were granted, you know, not being landmarked. The general objection, as I think the Ravinos commented this evening, as well as others, particularly when we were talking about Sub Cayuga, historic district, and things like that, is the sort of government oversight aspect associated with a landmark designation and who gets, you know, what authority to say what happens on a private residence property. And so I bring this to the fore for the purposes of the purpose underlying this nomination is the fact that this wall represents a singular physical characteristic in the village that is unique, not only to Garrison, but to a large percentage of the village. And that is generally, and I think everyone here this evening opine that it is a well-regarded and well-loved feature of the village. Interestingly, another feature of our current code is that a wall like that could not be constructed in 2021. It would not be a permitted structure. So no one, in theory, is ever going to build a wall like that ever again. So if the repointing issue, for example, were clarified and regular care and maintenance of that wall was done by the current homeowners as it is currently done at their at their discretion and at their will, then landmarking this feature has zero impact on their day-to-day lives, their ownership of this wall. And for the purposes of Ms. Lothar's comments and Mr. Akers' comments earlier, it adds a layer of protection for the next generation who will move into the village and who are attracted to the historic nature of the village and those historic features that make it unique, like this wall and the walls on North Ellicott and the features that were nominated previously. So I think it's important that if we're going to close this time, that put the period on the sentence this evening, one way or the other, that everyone be sort of cognizant of that when they're making a decision. And if we could do a roll call vote, and each individual be given the opportunity to justify their vote, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, the only thing I will add, I guess, and again, this is not intended to try to influence anybody's vote on the matter, but just to be clear, if in fact repointing required a certificate of appropriateness, the stamp, what that essentially means is before they could repoint it, they'd have to come before the HPC and apply for a certificate of appropriateness. And the standard for granting a certificate of appropriateness is whether the work will not have a substantial adverse effect on the aesthetic, historical, or architectural significance of the property itself. It's difficult to imagine that repointing, as long as you're using, decent mortar, would be found to not be appropriate for a stone wall. But
can I interrupt you there? So, but that really is a subjective.
I don't think it is. I mean, how?
I mean, who you're saying that the Historic Preservation Commission would be enacted with making that decision, correct?
Well, yeah, that's their job.
Right. So
applying the design standards that have been adopted by the village and the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation of historic structures. So it's not whatever the whim they may have as to whether or not to grant a certificate of appropriateness. It's the statute says in making this determination, the commission's decision to approve or deny shall be guided by the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation as applicable and by the following principles, which is again laid out in the code. So I mean, it's not frankly any different than if somebody has to go before the planning board for approvals or the zoning board. There's criteria that guide those determinations.
I would also offer that with regards to repointing as an activity in specifics, the design guidelines are fairly clear as to what would be required, but the truth of the matter is that they're not adding a layer of anything. In effect, what the Secretary of Interior standards require with regards to repointing is that you hire a decent mason that knows what they're doing. The issue there will be, if and when that mason isn't decent. And of course, the trouble with that scenario is you only know that after the fact, right? And in essence, what happens is it looks like shoddy workmanship. But in this case, it goes that extra layer is to say, well, not only is the homeowner upset that they had a mason that did shoddy workmanship, but now, the village is equally upset that shoddy workmanship was completed, and now the quality of the wall has been diminished in that act.
Well, but Matt, aren't there, historic masonries that do these jobs only? Because I remember we had that issue with the stone steps at the Amherst State Park. They were considered a historic landmark, and it took us years and years to find somebody to repair those steps.
Yes, which would be an argument against landmarking this, because now that puts that burden on the private property owner to try and track that individual or, handful of individuals who might be available to do that kind of historic work down. And they're going to come at a premium to the private homeowner.
Well, that's definite though. I mean,
What do you mean? What?
that says it in the code right now that if a historic wall does need repair, it must assume that it hire a historic masoner to complete the work. Does
No,
that
it-
exist now?
It's baked into the historic landmark design guidelines,
So it is, it has been, always has been.
if it's a landmark.
Well, no, wait a minute. I don't think the design standards say anything about the qualifications of people
Well-
hired to do work on a
Right, so
property.
hold that thought for a second, Chip. So that's what I was gonna say, is that the basic bullet point, generic statements about mortar and masonry quality and things are stipulated in the design guidelines. They're kind of 5,000-foot view. They show a graphic of, uniform joint patterns, uniform color, as opposed to, big fat joints here and shallow joints there. And they specify a particular kind of mortar type and things like that. Generally speaking, those masons who work on historic properties more regularly are very familiar with the Department of Interior Standards and perform work appropriately. But then there are masons who go out and buy mortar and slap it in the joint, right? And so one of them is going to be cheaper than the other. You figure out which one.
But when I moved into the village per se, the reason was because it is historic. And I live in a historic home of 1820, and I paint that damn clapboard every 3 years. You know what I mean? And I will continue to do that because that's my choice. And I love the ambiance of the village because of those reasons. And the same thing, if I had such a wall in front of my house, oh my gosh, I would take care of it, hire whoever I need to do it correctly. For me, living in the village is about its preservation. And we live in the village because we love the village and its history. So therefore, to me, to maintain it, quite frankly, the cost wouldn't affect me in that sense. I would
Sure.
take care of it.
Sure, and I think the Rubinos would agree with you, and the
Yeah.
Rubinos do agree with you. The question is, what about the Smiths who buy it next?
Well, again, if you choose to live in the village, that's one thing we have to set straight. When the wall came down on Mill Street, the people who brought that property and bought the house and it came with the wall, they knew what they were buying into. This is a historic village. And when that wall came down, to this day, I am shocked to sit there at the stop sign on Glen Avenue and look at that, whatever you want to call it now. I mean, now they're erecting these weird facade blocks there. That wall came down for no good reason. Zero good reason. And it still to this day affects, it was like the entrance to Glen Avenue, that wall. And now it's forever missing and you can never rebuild it. And you could never rebuild a wall on Garrison that the Rubinos had either. So in my sense, you have to protect these structures. It is so important because that's what the village is all about.
I think there were other reasons why that wall came down.
There were a lot of
There was, they were trying to get to utilities, which aren't, on this,
No, there were many, I know, I heard their arguments, Deb, but the machinery could have lifted, there were many reasons they could have done it differently, because I spoke to engineers about it. They just barreled through the wall, because I heard their arguments, and honestly, they weren't completely truthful. Many ways they could have gone over the wall, and then they took down the rest of the wall instead of trying to repair it. Just many issues about that wall, and therefore, I don't want to see that happening again, sorry.
Yeah, well, I think, you used the word choice here this evening, and I think that, I certainly, as a village resident, value my freedoms of choices that I have. Number one, that I'm fortunate enough to live in the village, and my choices, I think I like the fact that, we can keep those available for residents, whether they've lived here for 50 years or they're moving in as new residents into the village. And, I just think it's important, especially in this, political climate, to keep those choices available to residents.
By the way, I'm just looking at the Secretary of Interior standards right now. There's a whole host of recommendations and material on, how to restore and preserve historic masonry, including mortar.
But is there clarity about repointing as an activity requiring?
No. No, the Secretary of Interior standards don't talk about when those, they're really just the technical standard. They're the substantive standards that they are developed for how to preserve historic structures. Those standards don't talk about procedural issues like certificates of appropriateness and things like that.
So there is some ambiguity, then you would agree in the.
Well, yeah, I would agree. I mean, as I said, my initial reaction, without looking at anything, you pointed out that the standards are standards that the village's consultant developed, clearly indicates that repointing is an activity that would require a certificate of appropriateness. My immediate reaction, not knowing that, was that it wouldn't, because to me that seemed like routine maintenance. So yes, I would agree there's an ambiguity.
Well, so then I guess to that point that, and to Trustee Torrey's comment earlier, the quality of the maintenance of the property falls to the property owner. In general terms, right? You paint your house 3 times every 3 years. I used to do that too, but I also chose at some point to put a vinyl siding. I had that right to do that. The Rubinos love that wall. They care for that wall. They maintain that wall, and there's no threat to that wall while the Rubinos live on that property. I think it's a fair statement. Were it to be landmarked, this ambiguity about repointing or not repointing should be resolved. But assuming for the moment that repointing did fall under the caveat of regular maintenance, then literally the landmark designation only applies to the private resident in the event of a demolition. Conversely, were it not to be landmarked, our demolition code also triggers another nomination conversation at some future date for some future property owner. As it stands right now, with landmark or no landmark.
So it's basically it's protected with or without landmark.
That is correct.
But I thought the demolition code didn't include R1, R2. It was just for, I'm sorry. So I thought that was just applying all properties located with mixed use, NMU, M1 or R3M zones.
I'm sorry, I take it back. You are correct.
Well,
What is that?
no, the demo code, but there's still, and this is one of the many issues that the rewrite is intended to clarify. Because you need a demolition permit under the Uniform Building Code, I should say you need a permit. You need to comply with the Uniform Building Code, New York State, in demolishing a building, or not necessarily a wall. Under our code, a different section of our code, you do require a building permit, which includes a demo permit. Again, this was the whole, that's just another example of the many conflicting provisions that we have in various chapters that were inconsistent with one another, and that we're trying. So it's true that the demolition chapter carved out R1, R2 from those provisions, but you still needed to get a permit to demolish, as I think, I would think people would agree. And I think every municipality in New York, I would think, would require a permit to demolish a building, no matter what the zoning is.
And I think the mayor's point, however, is that the referral caveat,
Yeah, that's true. The referral caveat, yes.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with, us as a municipality issuing a demo permit. That's a no-brainer. I have a problem with the referral caveat. And being that the majority, if not, with the exception of the new recent builds in the village of Williamsville, all of our homes, certainly all of our homes sitting up here, fall over the 50-year-old threshold. And therefore would be classified as being, historic, as Ms. Lothar also pointed out. So that's where I have an issue.
Oh, Trustee Ito, I have a question. So let's say that somebody backs into the wall accidentally on Garrison. It wasn't a meant demolition, okay?
right?
It was an accident, but it destroyed it enough where the homeowner decides, you know what, we just don't want to rebuild it. However, you're saying if they are protected, if they did request a demolition, what do you call it? Permit?
Yeah.
Now, this happened as an accident. Are they required to rebuild it?
No,
So that means it is a good idea to have it designated historic for those reasons alone.
no.
No.
No, I don't think the designation would impact whether or not a third party, I mean, what landmark designation prevents is the landowner from demolishing the property. It doesn't make them a guarantor against a tortious act by a third party, or an act of God or something like that. I mean, that's not what a landmark designation requires.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yep.
If I may. I've been following this mostly as a spectator because I've only been on the board for less than a month. And I'm, when we sited our house, I kept those big heavy wooden shutters on the front of the house with those metal S's because that's what I wanted the house to look like. But I keep coming back to words of Ronald Reagan. Government's first duty is to protect the people, not tell them how to run their lives. So I expect that we'll be in those position. Period.
Well, I think that, we're all, I think, it's clear even before we voted, where most of us stand up here. And we certainly, should have trustee to call for the vote this evening. And I just, it's just something we're gonna all have to agree to disagree on because, we all have different experiences that have gotten us to this point in life, and so be it.
So we're voting now on historic designation?
Yes, and since it's a roll call, you can either just say yes or no, or you can choose to explain your position.
Well, you heard my position earlier, and I'm yes for the designation.
Trustee Sherman?
No.
Trustee Etu?
For all the reasons that I laid out this evening, I have to admit I'm somewhat conflicted as that is in my neighborhood, and I do love that wall, but I do feel that at least currently under its current caretakers, it's certainly not threatened, and so for the time being, I'm going to say that no.
Deputy Mayor Piazza?
I want that wall to be there for the next 1,000 years. Yes.
Mayor Rogers.
Because I believe we should all have the freedom of choice, especially when it comes to our private property that we pay taxes on and that we alone are responsible to maintain. And there is no said given historic tax credit, if you will, by having that wall as a landmark designation. I vote no.
Okay. So.
Vote
motion-
is 3-2. It's a no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on, so third resolution, resolved that Maureen. Do you know how to pronounce that name?
The question.
Michael, Michelle,
McQuiston.
Michael, I'm sorry, Maureen. Of 54 Garden Parkway, Williamsville is hereby appointed to the Parks Committee through the end of the 2020-2021.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good, another new member.
Yes. Good. That's it for me.
Okay. Okay, so staff reports, since we didn't touch on them in work session, we're just gonna handle it all right now. So if you had anything, either in work session or for board agenda, I'm gonna ask that you give your report this time. So I'll start with Deputy Treasurer Pasco.
I want to thank the Village of Williamsville community for giving me the opportunity to be their deputy treasurer for the last 2 years. I learned a lot from this job, and I am thankful for the experience I've gained.
Well, I think I speak for everyone who's had the pleasure of knowing and working with you, that you will be missed, so thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Greco,
No, nothing that I haven't already talked about.
okay. Administrator Kindred,
Nothing from me, except that I will miss Hazel immensely. Good luck, Hazel. We'll talk this week.
Crew Chief Villanin,
No, I don't have anything further. Just again, gonna miss you, Hazel. Mr. Smiling Face. I know it's under that mask somewhere.
Community Development Director DePriest.
Just wanted to reiterate that there's a parks cleanup at South Long and Lehigh Parks this Saturday, 9 to 11 a.m. Don't need to bring anything, just be cognizant of wearing a mask. You can bring some gardening gloves if you want, and some light garden tools. But for the most part, it'll just be a large cleanup. We're hoping to have a lot of volunteers there, so it should be a good time. And again, I just wanted to also say what everyone else said. And Hazel, you will definitely be missed. It will be a different place without you. So thank you for the time that you've been here. And, it was great to work with you.
Okay, I think I covered everyone, and we have nothing for executive session this evening, so I will make a motion to adjourn the board meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, board meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We're all set.
Good night.
That's it.
Good night.
Good night, thank you. Okay.